The federal government has entire libraries dedicated to the men who built the American underworld. Volumes bound in legal tape detailing the lives of Capone, Luciano, Lansky. Search warrants, witness testimonies, and surveillance photos stacked to the ceiling. But search for the name Isabella Marino and you will find nothing. Not a whisper, not a redacted memo, not a single fading photograph. This isn't because she was innocent or a ghost. It's because the men who wrote those files, the informants who whispered in smoke-filled rooms, and the agents who hunted them were all terrified of a different kind of monster. The FBI kept files on men who used bullets and bombs. They had no protocol for a monster who used hope, love, and piety as her weapons. They had no file for a 19-year-old girl who was not just a part of the criminal underworld, but a force of nature that pruned it, rewrote its rules, and then vanished so completely, the underworld itself pretended she had never existed. This is the story of Isabella Marino, the Mafia heiress too evil for history to record. It is a story that has only ever been told in one room, by one man, 90 years after the fact. And it begins not with a gunshot, but with the opening of a ledger, a book that didn't track money but the price of a human soul. To understand the shadow Isabella cast, you must first understand the world that forged her. Baltimore, 1928. The city was not the polished metropolis of Chicago or the sprawling kingdom of New York. It was a city of brick, brine, and rust. It clung to the Patapsco River like a cold fog, and the docks were its dark heart. And that heart beat to the rhythm of one man, Don Giuseppe the Hand Marino. Giuseppe was old world, a Sicilian bull who had carved out a kingdom with his bare hands. His social club on Lombard Street wasn't a palace of marble and gold. It was a tomb of dark wood, stale cigar smoke, and cheap whiskey. A place where deals were buried and men disappeared with the outgoing tide. Giuseppe was the law. He controlled the unions, the liquor, the politicians, and the police. His power was absolute, built on a foundation of straightforward, predictable brutality. If you crossed him, you were found in the harbor. It was simple. It was understood. He was a monster, yes, but he was a known monster. And like all kings, he craved a legacy. He had sons, but they were like him, brutish, loud, and lacking imagination. And then he had Isabella. She was his miracle, his porcelain doll. At 19, she was rarely seen, kept cloistered in the family's opulent Guildford mansion, far from the blood and grime of the waterfront. While her brothers learned to handle a shotgun, Isabella was learning Latin and Greek. While they ran policy rackets, she was in the conservatory, reading Ovid and Machiavelli. She was pale, with eyes the color of wet slate, and a silence about her that the family mistook for piety, for fragility. To Don Giuseppe, she was his proof that the Marino name was not just gutter filth. She was his ticket to civility, his precious, unstained angel. And then there was me. My name is Salvatore Greco. I was the orphan Giuseppe took in, the quiet boy with a head for numbers. I wasn't family, not by blood. I was a tool. I counted his money, I recorded his sins in coded ledgers, and I was given the honor of acting as Isabella's chaperone, her tutor's assistant. I was the one who saw her when the family wasn't looking. I saw her watch a bird fall from its nest, and I watched her, in turn, watch the ants slowly dismantle it. She didn't weep. She didn't flinch. She just observed, with a clinical, cold curiosity. I was the first to realize that while Don Giuseppe ruled the city, he had no idea what he was harboring in his own home. He thought he was protecting his angel from the monsters. He never once considered that he was sheltering the single greatest monster of them all. The cracks in the Marino Empire appeared in the fall of 1928. A rival family, the Falcones, decided that Don Giuseppe had grown too comfortable, too slow. They were cruder, hungrier, and saw the docks as a prize to be taken, not shared. The ambush happened on a rainy Tuesday. It wasn't a clean hit, aimed at ending the war before it began. It was a message, written in shattered glass and the Don's own blood. They riddled his car with bullets, killing his driver and his personal bodyguard, but leaving the Don himself alive. Barely. He was rushed to a private hospital, a bullet lodged near his spine. He was alive, but he was crippled, bedridden. Panic ripped through the Marino organization. The capos were screaming for blood, for a war, but they had no leader. The sons were posturing, fighting amongst themselves. The Falcones were testing the perimeter, hijacking liquor trucks and muscling in on bookies. The kingdom was rudderless, and it was about to burn. I was in the Don's hospital room, a dark, oppressive suite that smelled of iodine and fear. The capos were gathered, their faces grim. They were arguing over who would be regent, and from his silk-sheeted bed, Don Giuseppe, pale and sweating, raised a trembling, bandaged hand. The room fell silent. He tried to speak, but it came out as a pained whisper. He looked past his brutish sons, past his brother, past his most loyal captains. His eyes found me, standing in the corner. And then he looked at the other silent figure in the room, his daughter, Isabella, who had been quietly reading a book of poetry in the corner. He pointed. "Isabella," he rasped, the word tearing from his throat. You will hold the interests. Sal will be your voice. He will read the books. You will listen. And you will hold." The capos were stunned. It was an insult. A girl, a 19-year-old child. They began to protest, but the Don's eyes flashed with his old fire. "You will obey. She is my blood. She is smart." They left the room seething, believing the old man had finally gone mad. When they were gone, Isabella closed her book. She looked at me, her face a perfect porcelain mask. "Sal," she said, her voice no louder than a rustle of silk. "Bring me the ledgers, not the financial ones. Bring me the other ledgers, the ones you and Papa keep, the ones with the favors, the debts, and the sins." I didn't know it then, but the war was already over. It just hadn't been fought yet. The capos expected orders to buy more shotguns, to recruit more muscle. They waited for Isabella to give the word for a bloody, block-by-block war of attrition. Instead, she locked herself in the mansion's library with me and the sin ledgers for 3 straight days. She didn't eat. She didn't sleep. She just read, her fingers tracing the lines of ink that detailed which politician had a weakness for young boys, which judge was skimming from court funds, which cop's wife had a laudanum addiction. I watched her absorb this map of human weakness, and her eyes weren't angry or even disgusted. They were alive. On the 4th day, she found her target. It wasn't Rico Falcone, the Don. It was his younger brother, Marco the Wolf Falcone, their most effective and feared enforcer. Marco was the one who had planned the ambush on her father. He was brilliant, ruthless, and, as the ledgers revealed, had one single exploitable flaw. He had recently married a young, beautiful woman from a good family, and he was pathologically, suicidally jealous. He adored her, and he mistrusted everyone around her. Isabella didn't send a bullet. She didn't send a bomb. She sent a whisper. She used me to arrange a chance meeting for the young wife at a high-end department store. A handsome, smooth-talking Marino soldier, chosen by Isabella for his looks, was instructed to simply compliment her. Nothing more. But Isabella made sure a Falcone-friendly gossip columnist saw the lingering glance. The next day, she had a different soldier accidentally mention to a Falcone bookie how he'd seen Marco's wife laughing with a stranger. She manufactured a betrayal from thin air, a web of insinuation. We watched from afar as the poison worked. Marco, already paranoid, began to unravel. He questioned his wife. He accused her. He confined her to their home. The gossip, now fed by Isabella's anonymous tips, intensified. He can't even control his own wife. The pressure built, the whispers becoming a roar in Marco's head. He started drinking, heavily. He missed meetings. He struck a maid man in public for looking at his wife. Finally, after a brutal, drunken argument, he beat his wife savagely. Her family, influential and proud, had him disavowed. In 1 week, Isabella had taken the Falcone's sharpest weapon and turned him into a pariah. Isolated, shamed, and consumed by a jealousy she had planted, Marco Falcone was found hanging from a shipyard crane. His death was ruled a suicide, a tragedy of passion. The Falcone family was crippled, their best strategist gone, and they never even knew a shot had been fired. I was chilled to the bone. This wasn't business, this was art. It was vivisection. And Isabella and she was just getting started. Don Giuseppe, hearing of Marco's suicide from his sickbed, was impressed. He didn't know the mechanics of it, only that his daughter had handled the problem, and it hadn't cost them a single bullet or barrel of whiskey. Good, he'd rasped, a proud smile on his face. Continue. Pruning. That one word, pruning, seemed to ignite something in Isabella. She now had her father's blessing, and she had a taste for this new, quiet power. She turned her attention inward. She decided the Marino family itself, in its panic after her father's shooting, had shown weakness, and weakness needed to be pruned. Her target was not a traitor. It was Luca the Bull Vescovi, her father's most loyal and most beloved capo. Luca was everything Isabella was not. He was loud, sentimental, deeply, truly religious. He was the one who managed the family's charitable face, the orphanages, the church donations, the neighborhood feasts. He was old world, a relic of a time of honor and respect. And in Isabella's new, cold world, old was a synonym for dead. She couldn't just kill him. Luca was too loved. His death would shatter the family's morale and turn the neighborhood against her. So she decided not to kill his body, but to kill his legacy, his reputation, his very soul. She came to me in the library, her request simple and monstrous. "Luca's books," she said, "the ones for the St. Sisto's Orphanage Fund. I need you to make adjustments." For 2 nights, fueled by black coffee and sheer terror, I did as she commanded. I didn't just move money, I created phantom invoices for bread that was never delivered, fictitious withdrawals for medicine that was never purchased. I fabricated a long, meticulous, and utterly damning trail of evidence that made it look like Luca Vescovi, the neighborhood saint, was skimming thousands, stealing from the mouths of orphans and the collection plates of the church. He was the most trusted man in the family, which made the betrayal all the more potent. Isabella didn't just want him dead, she wanted him erased. She wanted his name to be a curse. This was not about power. It was about control, absolute and theological. She was not just seizing a throne, she was rewriting the family's scripture. And Luca was the first saint she would rebrand as a demon. Once the ledgers were doctored, Isabella didn't show them to her father. He was too sentimental. He might have questioned it, demanded proof, or given Luca a chance to explain. Isabella didn't deal in chances. Instead, she had me anonymously deliver a copy of the falsified books to the Monsignor at the cathedral, the one man in the city whose moral authority rivaled the Don's. The Monsignor was a rigid, pious man who already believed the Marino family were sinners. This proof that their charity was a lie confirmed his darkest suspicions. The next Sunday, the Monsignor did not give a sermon on forgiveness. He gave a sermon on Judas. He spoke of the serpent in the garden, the wolf disguised as a shepherd, the man who steals from the mouths of babes to line his own pockets. He didn't use Luca's name. He didn't have to. The entire neighborhood, the entire family, knew who managed the orphanage fund. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. The women who used to kiss Luca's hand in the street now spat at his feet. The shopkeepers who once gave him free goods for the church now barred their doors. His own crew, men who would have died for him a week prior, looked at him with contempt. In the Mafia, you could be a killer, a thief, an adulterer. But to steal from the church, from orphans, it was an unforgivable sin. It broke the code. Luca was shattered. He was a proud man, and his reputation was the only thing he truly valued. He went to the Don's mansion, begging to see Giuseppe, to plead his case, to profess his innocence. I was there when Isabella met him at the door. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked at him with a cold, devastating pity. "Luca," she whispered, loud enough for the guards to hear, "my father, he is too sick for this. Your disgrace, it would kill him." She turned him away. He was excommunicated, not just from the church, but from the family. He was an outcast, a ghost in his own neighborhood. 3 days later, his body was found in an alley, a single bullet in his head. The official story was that a grieving father of one of the orphans he'd stolen from had taken revenge. His death wasn't a martyrdom, it was a squalid, pathetic end. And just like that, Isabella had eliminated a powerful old guard capo, consolidated her own power, and made herself look like the protector of her father's honor. I watched her at the funeral, a black veil over her face, the perfect picture of grief. And I realized She was the one who had ordered the hit. She had destroyed his soul, and then she had his body discarded. I was her perfect instrument, her voice, her hands, and I was terrified. My hands were clean of blood, but my soul was stained black just from standing in her shadow. I began to have trouble sleeping. I would see Luca's confused, pleading eyes. I would hear the click of the ledger rings as I forged the numbers. I tried to pull back. I pleaded sickness, a lingering cough, anything to avoid the daily meetings in the library. But Isabella, she noticed. She noticed everything. She didn't confront me. She didn't threaten me. She did something far, far worse. This is where I must speak of my brother, Matteo. Matteo was my only family. He was simple, not stupid, but kind. He was a creature of pure light in our city of shadows, working at the Pasticceria Rossi, always covered in a fine mist of flour and sugar. He saw no evil. He knew nothing of our world. He was the one, single, good thing I had in my life. And Isabella, in her cold, calculating way, learned of him. One afternoon, I came to the mansion for a meeting I could no longer avoid. She was in the parlor, and she was smiling. "Sal," she said, her voice light. "I visited the most charming little bakery today. On South High Street, the Rossi place. They have a young man there. Matteo. Your brother?" My blood turned to ice. "He is wonderful," she continued, picking a piece of lint from her black silk dress. "So trusting. He told me all about you, how you practically raised him, how you sent him money every week." She looked up, her slate-gray eyes meeting mine. "He's fragile, isn't he? This world, it's so hard. Businesses fail every day. Accidents happen." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. It was not a threat. It was a promise. It was a velvet glove, and I could feel the iron fist clenched inside it. I was trapped. She had put a leash around my brother's neck, and she was holding the other end. My function was no longer to be her hands. My function was to be her loyal, silent, and utterly broken slave. "The Falcones," she said, changing the subject as if she had just been discussing the weather. "They are bleeding but not broken. Rico and Paolo, the remaining brothers, they are desperate. I want you to arrange a meeting, a peace summit. Tell them the war is bad for business. Tell them my father is old, I am a woman, and I cannot rule alone. Tell them I want to talk of a merger." I knew it was a lie. I knew it was a trap. But I saw Matteo's flour-dusted, smiling face, and I nodded. "Yes, Isabella, I will arrange it." I felt like Judas, scouting the garden. The location for the peace summit was my choice, and Isabella approved it instantly. An abandoned cannery on the edge of Fells Point, its rotting piers stretching into the black water. The air was thick with the smell of fish guts, rust, and the oppressive damp chill of the harbor. It was a place of ghosts, a perfect sepulchre for a dead family. I sent the message, as instructed. I used a trusted intermediary, a priest who owed the Marino family his position. The bait was exactly as Isabella had designed it: peace. The promise of a merger that would make the Falcone brothers, Rico and Paolo, richer than they'd ever dreamed. They were desperate. They had lost their best strategist, Marco, to suicide, and their street-level operations were collapsing under the weight of Isabella's invisible, systemic attacks on their infrastructure. They had to accept. They had no choice. The night of the summit was cold, a razor-thin moon offering no light. I was there at the cannery, along with a small crew of 6 Marino soldiers. These were not her father's men. They were not old-school capos. They were young, hungry, and loyal only to Isabella. They were men who had seen her work and had chosen the future over the past. We waited in the vast, echoing main floor of the cannery. The only sound was the drip of water from the leaking roof and the lap of the tide against the pilings below. I had a knot in my stomach so tight I could barely breathe. I was sacrificing these men, and for what? For the safety of my brother. It was a choice that cost me the last fragment of my soul. At precisely 10 o'clock, we heard the crunch of gravel. 2 black sedans pulled up. Rico and Paolo Falcone got out, along with 6 of their own enforcers. They were tense, their hands deep in their overcoat pockets. They walked in, their eyes scanning the dark, cavernous room. Rico, the elder, spat on the floor. "Where is she?" he he demanded, his voice echoing. I stepped out from the shadows, my own hand on a pistol in my pocket. "She is delayed," I said, my voice sounding hollow, unfamiliar. "She wanted me to discuss the terms first." It was a lie, of course, a script. I was just there to hold them. The standoff was immediate. The 14 of us, 7 on each side, stood in a circle of suffocating tension. Every creak of the floorboards was a potential gunshot. The Falcone men were sweating, their eyes darting. This was wrong. They could feel it. Paolo looked at his brother. "Rico, I don't like this. This stinks." Rico quieted him with a look. He stared at me. 10 minutes, Rico said. "She gets 10 minutes, then we go, and the war is back on." I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. We were just the audience, waiting in the theater. The real show, the masterpiece, was happening at that very moment, 3 miles across town. While Rico and Paolo Falcone stood in that rotting cannery, surrounded by salt water and their own growing fear, Isabella Marino was not in a car, speeding to the meeting. She was not in a war room, directing her soldiers. She was at the Falcone family villa, in the affluent, quiet neighborhood of Roland Park. And she had not come with gunmen. She came with a box of pastries from the Pasticceria Rossi, my brother's bakery, and a bottle of expensive Amaro. She was dressed not in black, but in a simple, elegant blue dress. She rang the doorbell, and when the maid answered, she asked for matriarch Elena Falcone, the mother of Rico, Paolo, and the late Marco. You see, Isabella's planning was deeper than any of us could have imagined. For the past 2 weeks, she had been accidentally running into Elena Falcone at morning mass. She had introduced herself as Anna, a distant cousin of the Marino family, a girl who wanted no part in the men's business. She had charmed the old woman. She had prayed with her, wept with her over the tragedy of Marco's death, and confessed a secret. She told Elena she was deeply, secretly in love with her eldest son, Rico. She had convinced the matriarch that this was the real reason for the peace summit. It wasn't a merger of business, it was a merger of families. She was staging an engagement, so when Isabella arrived at the villa that night, Elena Falcone welcomed her with open arms, believing this young woman was the angel who would finally bring peace, who would save her remaining sons. She brought Isabella into the formal dining room, the table set with the family's best silver and china, photos of her sons and late husband adorning the walls. "They are at the meeting now?" Elena asked, her hands trembling with hope. "Yes," Isabella said, pouring the old woman a glass of the dark, sweet Amaro. "They are finalizing the details. We are toasting to the future, to our new family." Elena Falcone raised her glass, tears in her eyes. "To family," she said. And as she drank, the front door of the villa opened, but it wasn't Rico and Paolo. It was 2 of Isabella's cleaners, men who didn't carry guns, but garrotes and gasoline cans. Isabella sat, and she watched. She made Elena watch, as the men didn't just kill her, they erased her. They systematically tore every photograph from the walls. They smashed every heirloom. They pulled the baptismal certificates, the wedding albums, the family Bible, and piled them on the ancient dining table. And then they set it on fire. They didn't just kill the matriarch. They burned the entire Falcone history, their legacy, their past. Only when the room was choked with the smoke of burning memories did they silence Elena. They made her death look like she had been trapped in the accidental fire. Back at the cannery, the 10 minutes had passed. Rico Falcone pulled his pistol. "That's it, Sal. We're done." His men raised their weapons. My own men did the same. The air crackled. This was it, the slaughter I had arranged. But before the first shot could be fired, the cannery's massive steel door shrieked open. A single figure stood silhouetted against the dim moonlight. It wasn't a soldier. It was a young boy, a runner from the Falcone neighborhood, his face pale and streaked with tears. He ran past the gunman, straight to Rico. "Rico! Rico! It's the villa! It's Mama!" The words hung in the air, more powerful than any bullet. The boy sobbed. "There's a fire. They said she's gone. It's all gone." The gun in Rico Falcone's hand. It just fell. It clattered to the concrete floor. The look on his face wasn't rage. It wasn't fear. It was hollow. It was the look of a man who had not just been defeated, but unmade. He understood in that instant what had happened. This wasn't a botched negotiation. This wasn't a rival crew hitting his home. This was a scalpel. It was Isabella. She hadn't come for his business. She hadn't come for his life. She had come for his past. She had reached back and ripped his family out by the roots, burned their very memory. What was he supposed to do? Avenge his mother. How? By starting a war with an enemy who didn't fight, but who erased. He and Paolo just broke. They fell to their knees. My men, Isabella's men, didn't even have to disarm them. They were already ghosts. They were rounded up, not with a firefight, but with the quiet, resigned shuffling of dead men. Isabella hadn't just killed a family. She had orphaned them, invalidated their history, and stolen their future, all in a single, perfectly orchestrated evening. As I watched them being led away, I knew they wouldn't be found in the harbor. That was too messy, too normal. No, they would simply vanish, and the city would be told they had fled back to Sicily, defeated and shamed. And I, Salvatore Greco, was the architect of the trap. My brother was safe, and my soul was forfeit. Don Giuseppe Marino was finally back on his feet by the winter of 1929. The city he returned to was quiet. The Falcone family had vanished. Their territories, their rackets, their political connections, all had been seamlessly, bloodlessly absorbed into the Marino Empire. The war was over before the old Don even knew how it had been fought. He was overjoyed. He saw the results, the victory, the sudden absolute peace, and he attributed it all to his daughter, his brilliant, pristine angel. He threw a massive feast at the mansion, a victory party. The entire organization was there. The Don, still walking with a cane but his voice booming again, stood at the head of the long table. He raised his glass, his eyes finding Isabella, who sat at his right hand, demure and silent, in a dark velvet dress. "My friends," he bellowed, "we have faced the serpent and we have won. My sons, they have strength. My capos, they have loyalty. But my daughter," he beamed at her, his face flush with pride and wine. "My Isabella, she has the mind of a Roman general and the heart of, well, the heart of a Marino. She has done what I could not. She has brought us peace." He officially, publicly named her his successor, his consigliere, his right hand. The capos, even the ones who had doubted her, cheered. They saw the victory, the profits. They saw the end of a war they had all feared. They didn't know how she'd done it. They didn't know about the rumors, the excommunication, the psychological torment, the fire. They only saw the result. Her 19-year-old girl, who had not visibly fired a single bullet, was now officially the most powerful man in the city. And I, Salvatore Greco, was promoted alongside her. I was no longer just the bookkeeper. I was her de facto consigliere, the man who spoke with her voice. I stood by her side, toasted by the most feared men in Baltimore. I was the most trusted man in the organization, and I was the most haunted. I had nightmares of fire, and the smell of flour and the sound of a ledger book closing. Isabella's masterpiece was complete, or so I thought. Isabella's power was now absolute. Her father was the public face, the Don, but she was the engine. She ran the family with the cold, silent efficiency of a surgeon. She didn't hold court in the smoky social club. She held it in the mansion's library. She didn't use enforcers. She used politicians, bankers, and judges. She was building an empire that was not just criminal but corporate. And yet, I saw her watching her own father. I saw the way her eyes lingered on him when he would laugh too loudly, or when he would make a sentimental, old-school decision, like forgiving a debt for a widow or refusing to do business on a holy day. Don Giuseppe was a creature of passion, of a certain brutal honor. He would have approved of the victory over the Falcones, but he would never, ever have approved of the method. The targeting of a rival's mother, the psychological destruction, the burning of the home. These were not his ways. These were, in his mind, cowardly, dishonorable. He was a dinosaur, and Isabella was the Ice Age. She knew with that chilling clarity of hers that her father was now a liability. He was the one man alive who could, if he ever learned the truth, undo her. He was the only man she couldn't control with fear or blackmail. He was, in his own way, incorruptible. He was the last piece of the old world she was systematically dismantling. He was a loose end. One afternoon, she called me to the conservatory. She was pruning orchids, her delicate fingers snipping away dead blossoms with surgical precision. "My father has worked so hard," she said, not looking at me. "He looks tired. This business, it has taken its toll on him." She turned, her slate-grey eyes meeting mine. "I think it is time for him to retire, to enjoy his life. We should honor him." I knew what that word meant. Honor. It was the same word she had used before she destroyed Luca Vescovi. "A small dinner," she continued. "A private celebration. Just the family. Just you, me, and him. A retirement party. You will arrange it, Sal. You will arrange it for tonight." My blood ran cold. She was not just seizing the throne. She was cleansing it, and she was going to make me watch. The retirement dinner was not in the grand dining hall. She had me set it in the Don's small private study, the one place he felt truly comfortable, surrounded by his books, his old world maps, and a massive carved oak desk. It was intimate. It was warm. A fire crackled in the hearth. Isabella had prepared the meal herself, or so she claimed. A simple, rustic Sicilian stew. The three of us sat at the small table. Don Giuseppe was in a celebratory mood. He truly believed his daughter was honoring him, that he was entering his golden years as a respected king, passing the crown to a worthy and loving heir. He was nostalgic, telling stories of the old days, of his arrival in America, of the first man he'd ever killed. He was so proud of his empire, but mostly proud of her. Isabella was the perfect, adoring daughter. She listened with rapt attention. She laughed at his old jokes. She kept his glass full. "Papa," she said, her voice thick with what anyone else would have mistaken for genuine emotion, "you built all this. From nothing. You gave us everything." Then she rose and went to a dark wooden cabinet. "I have something for you. A special retirement gift." She produced a dusty, unmarked bottle. 1908 Barolo, your birth year. I had Sal find it for you. It was very difficult. She uncorked it with reverence. The Don's eyes lit up. "Ah, Isabella, you know your father." She poured him a glass. She did not pour one for herself or for me. Allergies, she'd claimed earlier. She raised her own glass, filled with water. "A toast," she said, her eyes glittering in the firelight. "To the man who built this all, and to the future he has given me." The Don beamed, raised his glass high, and drank. Deeply, he sighed with pleasure. Bellissimo. The dinner continued. He told more stories, but after an hour, he began to yawn. He rubbed his eyes. I am an old man. The wine, the food. I am tired." Isabella stood and kissed his forehead. "Go, Papa. Rest. You've earned it." He smiled, leaned on his cane, and walked slowly to his adjoining bedroom. Sal and Isabella sat in silence, listening to the fire crackle. We didn't speak for an hour. Then the Don's private physician, a man on Isabella's payroll, quietly entered the study and went into the bedroom. He emerged 10 minutes later. He looked at Isabella and nodded once. "His heart," the doctor said, his voice flat. "It just gave out. A peaceful end. I'm sorry." Isabella nodded, her face a mask of perfect, tragic grief. She had poisoned her own father. And as I looked at the bottle of 1908 Barolo on the table, I realized she had made me procure the bottle and the poison. My fingerprints were the only ones on it. I was not just the witness. I was the accomplice. I was the insurance. The funeral of Don Giuseppe Marino was the largest the city had ever seen. The streets were clogged with black cars, weeping women and men in dark overcoats. The cathedral was overflowing. Politicians, judges, and police captains all came to pay their respects to the great man who had, as the papers said, died peacefully in his sleep of natural causes. And at the center of it all was Isabella. Draped in a black veil, her shoulders trembling, she was the perfect grieving princess. She accepted condolences with a tragic, quiet dignity. She was the image of filial piety. And every capo, every soldier, every man in the Marino organization looked at her with a new, profound respect and sympathy. She had not seized power. It had been thrust upon her. She was the grieving daughter, forced to take up her sainted father's burden. The transition was flawless. The official story was set in stone. Don Giuseppe, a titan, had died of a heart attack. The Falcone family, they were a footnote, a minor rival who had, as the whispers said, fled back to Sicily in shame after failing to topple the Don. The suicides, the accidents, the fires, they were just the chaotic noise of a city, completely unconnected. The FBI, which was just beginning to take organized crime seriously on a national level, had no file to open. There were no bodies, there were no witnesses, there was no crime. There were only tragedies. And Isabella, now Don Marino at the age of 20, ruled it all. She ruled with me, Sal Greco, by her side. I was her shadow, her voice, the man who knew everything and could say nothing. My brother Matteo was safe. His bakery was flourishing, protected, though he never knew by what. I was, by all accounts, the second most powerful man in Baltimore, and every night I went to sleep, praying I wouldn't wake up. The organization ran like a clock. But the terror, the quiet atmospheric terror, was absolute. Isabella never raised her voice, she never had to, she just looked at you, and you knew that she knew everything. She knew your weaknesses, your secrets, your fears, and you knew she would not hesitate to use them. We are no longer in 1929. We are in a clean, sterile room in a high-end nursing home. The year is 2024. The man speaking is me, Salvatore Greco. I am 94 years old. The man listening is a historian, a young, eager man who has been tracking down whispers of a ghost in the Baltimore underworld for years. He looks at me, his tape recorder spinning. But nothing, the historian asks, breathless. 94 years, and nothing. No files. No informants ever spoke. How is that possible? The FBI, Hoover, they would have... Someone would have talked. I laugh. It is a dry, rattling sound, like stones in a jar. Talked, I say, my voice a thin whisper. Oh, you don't understand. The FBI looks for bullets, they look for bank trails, they look for bodies. Isabella, she dealt in a different currency. She didn't leave evidence. She left tragedies. I lean forward and the historian leans in. You can't put psychological torment on a rap sheet. You can't indict a person for weaponized jealousy. When Marco Falcone hung himself, it was a suicide. When Luca Vescovi was shamed and outcast, it was church business. When Don Giuseppe died, it was a heart attack. She was a social plague. The underworld, the real underworld, they knew. They knew what she did to the Falcones. They knew what she did to her own father. And they were so terrified. They buried the story themselves. They tore her name from their own memories. It was an oath of silence bound not by honor, but by pure, unadulterated terror. They were afraid that if they even spoke her name, she would somehow hear them. The historian is silent for a long time. What happened to her? I smile, a grim, skull-like expression. She ruled. For 10 years. She turned the Marino family into a legitimate corporation. She went to boardrooms, not back alleys. And then, in 1939, she just vanished, sold everything. The mansion, the businesses, told the family she was retiring to Italy. She was not yet 30. She was never seen again. The historian looks disappointed. So that's it? She just wins? She gets away with it all, and the only record is you? I can feel the rattle in my own chest. The end is near. I know it. I have one last thing to do. Proof, I whisper. You want proof? I point a single skeletal finger to the fireplace, a modern brick-faced gas fireplace in my sterile room. The third brick, and from the left, the bottom, it's loose. The historian, confused, goes to the fireplace. He pulls at the brick. It comes free. Behind it is a hollow, and inside that hollow is a small vellum-bound book. He pulls it out. It is impossibly old, but perfectly preserved. He opens it. The pages are filled with elegant, precise script, Isabella's script. But it is not a financial ledger. It's not a list of names, it's something else. He reads the entries aloud, his voice trembling. Marco Falcone. Jealousy. Method. Rumor. Result. Suicide. Luca Vescovi. Piety. Method. Forgery. Result: excommunication, execution. Elena Falcone. Hope: method, deception, arson. Result: erasure. Giuseppe Marino. Pride. Method: poison. Result: retirement. The historian looks at me, his eyes wide with a terrible, dawning horror. "My God," he whispers. It wasn't a book of accounts. It was a catalogue. A catalogue of the human weaknesses she had turned into weapons. "She gave it to me," I whisper, "the day she left. My trophy case," she called it. "Hold this for me, Sal, a reminder of our work." The historian turns the page, the last page. There is only one entry, one name, my name. Salvatore Sal Greco. Fear. The historian looks at me, confused. "But there's no result. The line is blank. She let you go." I feel a small, cold smile touch my lips. "Turn the page," I rasp. He turns the final, empty page, and on the back cover, written in the same elegant ink, is a single, chilling checkmark. He looks at me. I close my eyes. My fear, it hadn't been pending. It hadn't been a result. It was the method. My fear for my brother had been her weapon. It had been her perfect, silent, 10-year-long masterpiece. And I had been her greatest trophy.